So this past week, I saw 3 different video game adaptation announcements, and one of them sent me down quite the rabbit hole. We got the Legend of Zelda live-action casting news, which actually looks pretty promising, by the way. And then Netflix reminded us that they still have that Assassin's Creed show in the works. Yikes, and apparently a Mortal Kombat 2 trailer dropped. Now, I had seen tons of posts about the Zelda casting, but I genuinely had no idea if there was even a Mortal Kombat trailer until I was scrolling on social media one night before bed and happened across a video with over 900,000 views asking one very specific question. Why is Jade bald? I thought, huh? And pulled up the trailer. Basically, that single question sparked the idea for this whole video because it made me think, shoot, here we go again. At this point, I don't know how many times they've done this to us, but I would really, really love for it to stop. So, bald Jade. To be totally honest with you, I'm not a massive Mortal Kombat fan. And like I said, the only reason I even knew this trailer dropped was because my entire timeline just exploded. Everyone was talking about Jade being bald, but even I, someone who isn't all that familiar with the franchise, still know that Jade is a super iconic female character. I've seen her all throughout the franchise over the years, and this whole bald thing was really confusing me. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I went digging through 30 years of Mortal Kombat history. And you know what I found? At no point during any adaptation, any game, anything, was Jade ever without hair. Not once. In 3 decades. Here's the kicker. This got so much attention that one of the movie's producers actually responded to a tweet about the whole thing. And his answer was essentially, "You'll have to wait and see what the reason is." I'm sorry, what? You developed lore about making her bald? I don't know, is this some sort of reverse engineering of the tough girl pipeline where characters now grow their hair out instead of cutting it off? Because that would be refreshing. And I'm sure this is completely unrelated, but let me just show you a few other recent projects this actress has been in, including that upcoming Naughty Dog game where...
Oh my gosh, she's bald! She's bald and she's torturing people who have hair!
But I'm sure that's just a total coincidence, right? With this brand new introduction of Jade's mysterious hair lore. You know what's even more wild about this whole thing? The media's reaction. I was reading some of their responses to fans questioning Jade's newfound baldness, and I happened to also come across this article about the Legend of Zelda live-action casting. And honestly, the comparison between the two is just chef's kiss. This same publication, while shaming fans for not accepting the modernized Jade, a character that's been established for decades, was also simultaneously complaining about a missed opportunity on Nintendo's part, saying that they should have cast a certain actor for the role of Princess Zelda because it was a perfect match. It's almost sad at this point, the blatant double standard that they just can't seem to see. When it fits the narrative, visual accuracy is super important. When it doesn't, suddenly fans are the problem for calling it out. This, of course, all ties into things that have been happening across Western media for years now, and these live-action adaptations just make it so painfully obvious. At the heart of all of this, it really seems like so many of the people making these adaptations don't actually have respect for the source material, or for us, the audience. At this point, it even feels like active contempt. On just the storytelling end of this, it's almost this attitude of, we know better. They look at these beloved characters and worlds that have made billions of dollars and created passionate fan bases and somehow think, yeah, but we can improve this. We can modernize it. For a while now, that modernizing always seems to mean the same thing. Cramming in some lecture or unwanted ideologies that don't serve the story or characters. They don't do it because it makes narrative sense. They do it because someone decided the original wasn't progressive enough for their mythical modern audience. Here's the thing. We've already connected with these characters and worlds. We already love them just the way they are. We've spent hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours with them. When you improve them by making unnecessary changes or stripping away what made them special in the first place, you're essentially telling us that our love was misplaced, that we were wrong to care about them as they were, and that your new versions are better, that they are actually what we should care about instead. Nowhere is this more obvious than with HBO's The Last of Us. Okay, I know some of you out there enjoyed The Last of Us, and if you did, I respectfully question your taste and ask you to please cover your ears for this next part. I just couldn't get there. And it wasn't just one thing, it was everything. The whole show. Before it even released, I could not get behind the casting at all for pretty much any character. The only person who felt right to me was Marlene. And how could she not? It's the same actress that played her in the game, so of course she felt authentic. But the checkbox casting was honestly just the beginning of my issues. Then there were the story changes that made everything worse. How the infection spreads, Tess's death, weird time jumps, and of course, the foundational changes made to Joel and Ellie, starting with what they did to Joel's character. Right off the bat, they completely softened him. Game Joel was morally ambiguous, closed off, pragmatically violent. That's what made him so compelling. He wasn't depicted as a hero, but as a multi-layered, complicated man that the player got to know over time. But the show took all of that away and turned him into this weird, emotional, soft, one-dimensional version that had completely lost all of that hard edge. And the biggest problem with this is that by doing that, by fundamentally changing his character throughout the whole show, you destroy his entire character arc. His relationship with Ellie in the game is powerful because it's a bond that shouldn't have formed. He starts out rude, closed off, and then slowly opens up over the course of a year. When Joel makes a joke with Ellie or shows any vulnerability, it means something because the game had earned those moments. The show, on the other hand, wanted all the emotional payoff without doing any of the work to get there. And then there's Ellie. Again, right off the bat, they turned her into this combative character who's activated by violence. Their word, not mine. The showrunners literally said Ellie gets excited when Joel beats someone to death because it shows they're magnets destined to click together. That's just weird and not Ellie at all. Game Ellie is consumed by survivor's guilt. She's terrified of being alone. She's deeply empathetic. She doesn't like violence. She's disturbed by it. And all of this only adds to her development by the time we get into the meat of part 2. Because again, you have this really impactful arc of who she was in the first game versus how much she's grown and changed since then. But the show decided to make a total mockery of all of that. To me, the whole thing felt like character assassination. Like someone looked at these beloved, complex characters and said, yeah, but what if we made them more likable? What if we made Joel softer so he's more immediately sympathetic? What if we made Ellie more aggressive so she seems stronger? Like, why? If that's totally different from the actual characters they're supposed to be. Why are we doing that? And I think this really came to the surface in season 2 because it became so clear that this wasn't just about adapting the story. It was this active contempt and disrespect for the original work. And honestly, for the audience too. The Last of Us isn't the only one. Look at the Borderlands movie. They completely missed on the casting, story development, and irreverent tone that made those games special. Or the Halo show, where the creators openly admitted they hadn't played the games, and then stripped Master Chief of everything that made him iconic. Taking his helmet off constantly, making him emotional and rebellious, they turned him into just some guy. It's this pattern of, we can improve this, that keeps happening. And it's exhausting. But here's what gives me hope. Some studios out there actually do get it. We've all seen firsthand that when creators understand what makes these worlds special, when they have genuine love for the source material, you can feel it immediately. Like, I knew literally nothing about League of Legends before Arcane, but I was emotionally destroyed by Vi and Jinx within the first 3 episodes. And I knew that I was watching something very special. It was so obvious that the people behind the show wanted nothing more than to celebrate the characters that fans loved so much. And that's exactly what happened happened. Riot, with the help of Fortiche, put true love, care, and appreciation into what they created, and across the internet, you will basically find nothing but praise and love for their adaptation. That's what a good adaptation looks like, taking what's already there and building on it with love. The animation was gorgeous, the voice acting was incredible, and every character felt so real and genuine. You could tell how much getting this right meant to Riot. They looked at their game characters and said, how can we show people why we love these characters so much? Or look at Cyberpunk Edgerunners. David and Lucy weren't even game characters, but it still felt like Night City. All that corporate dystopia, the body modification obsession, the way technology both elevates and destroys people. Studio Trigger brought their signature animation style, but completely respected what the world actually is. CD Projekt Red was obviously working with them pretty closely, and by the end, you genuinely cared about characters you'd never heard of before just because of how much respect and care went into telling the story. And then there's Sonic. When that first design dropped with those horrifying human teeth, they could have doubled down and said, this is our artistic vision. Deal with it. But instead, they actually listened to fans instead of turning on them. They went back to the drawing board, spent more money, delayed the movie, and gave us a Sonic that actually looked like Sonic. They humbled themselves, admitted they were wrong, and gave us an authentic version of the character we all know and love. That's what respecting your audience looks like. That's what happens when you care more about getting it right than protecting your ego. And you might notice that all my examples here are essentially coming from animated adaptations. Yes, Sonic is live action, but we're just talking about his animated design. But that's because I'm still waiting for a live action adaptation that really nailed it. I feel like we still haven't gotten that, but please let me know if I'm forgetting one. I know people have praised Fallout. For me, there were still quite a few misses in that show, and it was unfortunately enough to overshadow anything they might have done right. And then I know The Witcher was technically a book adaptation, so I won't even go down that road. I mean, are we really to the point where the Minecraft movie is our gold standard for live actions? Getting back on track, this all comes down to respect. Respect for the source material and respect for the audience. Respecting the source material means working with established lore instead of constantly fighting against it. Understanding that these are characters people have spent hundreds of hours with. When you adapt a game, you're not just borrowing names and faces, you're inheriting relationships that fans have built with these worlds. It can be as simple as getting the costume right, keeping a character's signature weapon, understanding their core personality traits, or, making sure they have hair when they're supposed to have hair. Of course, I'm not saying you can't make any changes. I know sometimes you have to adapt things for different mediums, but when you do make changes, they should feel like they're coming from a place of understanding. If you can't easily justify those changes to the fan base in a way that makes sense and feels natural, then you're probably missing something important about why people fell in love with the characters in the first place. Respecting the audience also means acknowledging that we're not dumb, okay? We know these worlds, we understand the lore, we can tell when you've done your homework and when you haven't. It also means that when fans point out something that looks or feels off, you listen, instead of dismissing us all as toxic. Fans get vocal because we care. We love these characters, we love these worlds. When we point out something that doesn't feel right, it's not because we just want to be difficult. It's because these characters and stories mean something to us. The Sonic team understood that. They listened, they fixed it, and look how that turned out. One can only dream that others will start to do the same. So Bald Jade led us down quite the rabbit hole. And here's what that glistening head clearly reminds us. When studios approach adaptations with respect and genuine love for the source material, they succeed. When they approach them with this contempt or this we know better attitude, they don't. We're not asking for perfection here, We're just asking for respect. The blueprint is already there. You have the source material, and all these characters and worlds are beloved for a reason. Don't take those reasons away from us, please. But seeing the success of things like Arcane and Edgerunners and the failure of things like, I think some studios are finally figuring out that working with and for fans instead of against them actually makes them more money. A wild concept, right? So let me ask you, which video game adaptation has hurt you the most? Which one gave you hope? Are you feeling optimistic about these latest announcements? Because even with everything we've talked about today, I'm still holding out hope. Our beloved characters deserve better. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.